Janne and Leonard, good morning and nice to have you here in the studio.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
How has your morning been so far?
Oh, thank you. It's been lovely, chilly, early morning for me at least. I don't know about you, but I know you used to bicycle around a lot, so must be a bit chilly today.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, no bicycle today, but I had time for a short gym in the morning. So
okay.
That's good.
There's a long winter coming and there's plenty of time to bicycle. Today we are going to have a conversation with the headline CFO in a prime position to drive ESG efforts across the business. But before we go to this topic, I want to ask you what kind of a career has led to these positions that you are having nowadays?
Well, I used to work a lot with management consulting, and I was always interested in shared services and how to organize finance. And then it started feeling that it would be super to also be responsible myself for how to implement those changes and how to lead an organization efficiently. So I guess that was, in short, how I ended up in this position.
Mm-hmm. And Leonard?
I almost came here by accident.
accident, though.
What a good accident, because I became very interested in climate change and sustainability when I was doing my master thesis at Oulu University, where I'm doing also my PhD currently. And I just became so fascinated how finance and climate change and climate itself is related together, and how can we use our management control and accounting measures to move forward. And from there, I've been working with management as a management consultant at Azets, but also as a member of the Finnish Accounting Association at the Nordic Sustainability Reporting Standard, or the NSRS.
Yeah, an important topic. And now when we get to talk about the legislation when it comes to ESG, can you briefly explain the legislation that combines ESG and financial management? It's a changing field, I would say, but how do you see?
It is evolving very quickly, and the EU, among other parts, is pushing very hard on this. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, as it's known, brings new requirements to companies. They need to report on their sustainability strategy, on their goals, on their actions, and this is very new. Also, they need to incorporate the financial aspects of these actions and these. And Leo, maybe you can talk us through what we are meaning by that.
Certainly. So when we're talking about the financial aspect of the CSRD, we're talking about double materiality analysis, which means that we are choosing the subjects which are material to the company in terms of sustainability, but also the financial impact. So let me give you an example of carbon offsetting. We have carbon emissions that occur from companies, and that's from the different operations, and that's the environmental impact. But when we want to offset those carbon emissions, meaning that we want to take those emissions out from, let's say, with carbon sinks or something else, so we don't want to take them away, we need to use carbon offsets, and these cost some money. So we need to make an investment which results in financial impact. So in these cases, we are combining the financial impact into the sustainability impact, and also consider the risks and opportunities that are related both in the impact and the financial impact.
What would you say, how difficult is this situation for companies with this ever-changing legislation?
I'd say it's going to be tough, because there's going to be a lot new processes and a lot new subjects that need to be learned. Of course, we have some benchmarks that we can use, but we're not just talking about reporting. We're talking about due diligence processes. We're talking about auditing processes, and how these different obstacles, they are not inhibiting the implementation, but they're certainly making it difficult. But we also have to think about our culture and how thinking about sustainability. Now we're just thinking about through the perspective of reporting, then this is legislation. But if we think about how the world is getting warmer, and we have dire social crises and social events happening, including wars at different parts of the world and close to us, these affect our companies. And at the same time, we have to start to consider how these externalities are affecting our companies, either by risk or opportunity.
Yeah, and I would say, even though you understood the legislation today, it might be changed tomorrow. So it's the
It is
speed it
changing-
fast.
It is changing all the time, and
Yeah.
we cannot expect the future changes to be the only changes. It is very important. There's the obvious new learning for the companies. You need to learn new reporting, new standards, and you need to have resources and IT systems and everything in place for that. But it's not only a change for the company, it's a change for very many other stakeholders too. It's a change for auditors, for example, because they will be responsible in the future to audit these reports too. How will they build up the knowledge? How will they do the audit? We don't have very much experience on that yet. It's the same for authorities. We've seen that in some countries, for example, with the anti-money laundering legislation, and there has not been optimal support from authorities on how companies should do these processes, and that has led to some fines that not are always very good. Then there's another thing which I would like to bring up, which is that we need to change the internal culture too. We need to become, sometimes when I talk to CFOs and look at public information, it seems that companies are still thinking of sustainability reporting as an external, something that kind of just added on and is a financial burden. We should move away from that, and we should move to a culture where we all see this as an opportunity, and we need to take that culture to the grassroots level to understand what kind of risks and opportunities we have there. Because as always, all the wisdom does not lie within management. We need to get it from the grassroots level.
Exactly. We went through quite many challenges, but is there anything you want to add when it comes to implementing this legislation?
I think companies just have to start to prepare, and they need to not just be aware of the legislation, how it applies to them, but how this legislation will apply to all companies. It's not just public companies and large companies which are in the standard or in the directive itself, but also the small, medium-sized companies that are in the value chain. Because now we just have to look at over our own initial financial impact and sustainability impact, and start to look at how the small and medium-sized companies in the value chain are affected. So it becomes a large-scale project, and we need to have some resources. And for example, the CFO is in a very good position to move forward and implement these resources all over the organization.
What would you say, whose responsibility is this whole question from the company's point of view?
Well, obviously, sustainability cannot be one person's or one organization's responsibility. It needs to be everybody's responsibility. Even though I think the CFO has a very important responsibility there, because if I look at companies, very few companies have so far nominated a CSO, so Chief Sustainability Officer. And as far as they have not done that, I think a lot of the responsibilities lie on the CFO. There will be also responsibilities on the CFO when the CSOs arrive, but for now, the main responsibility, in my opinion, lies with the CFO. The CFO has the resources, they have the processes, and they have the organization for reporting, and they own a lot of the data that we are going to need for the sustainability reporting. And thus, it is only natural that it's part of the CFO's role.
You're saying that we are going to see more chief sustainability officers. In what sized companies must have this kind of a position in the near future? What is your estimation?
Well, it depends, but I would say that large companies and public companies, at least those companies which are directly affected by the legislation, will have a CSO somewhere in the future. Of course, we do not know what is the role and what is the position and how it's built, because it's just coming up and we're just talking about it. But before we have the CSO, we should have someone who's responsible for implementing this legislation, but also the requirements of the shareholders and the stakeholders and everybody in the value chain. So at that point, in our opinion, it's clear that it's a CFO, because a CEO is important, but the CFO is the operational and financial heart of the organization.
So can we say that CFOs has a special role in this question?
Yeah, very special role.
Anything you want to add when we think about this role, especially or?
Well, I would like to emphasize the change in culture. So we need to change from thinking about this as an external reporting, something that needs to be done, to something that is the integral part of the operations of the company.
And the ESG improvements, anything you want to mention about that when it comes to CFO's responsibility and work?
Well, I could give one example is internal price of carbon. When we're talking about internalizing the externalities, what I mean that when we look at carbon emissions, and then we want to understand, okay, what is the financial impact of that? We can make a monetary value of our carbon emissions, which becomes the internal price of carbon, which we can then use as a shadow price or an actual price when we're trying to evaluate our investments and future investments. And what we're trying to do is understand how these investments affect to the climate, but also how financially it affects the company. So this is one example where it combines the financial and the sustainability subject, not just from the legislation, but also on the operational level. So this is why we try to manage, as a CFO, you try to manage the financial aspect and the risks and opportunities and gain new finance. Because when we understand the risks and we know what are the opportunities, we can become more cost efficient, but we can also find new financial opportunities from the banks or in terms of green bonds or other financial instruments.
I think you just gave a perfect example of what, if we think long ago in the past, the CFOs or the finance was seen as a bean counter and not as something that would bring anything to the business, but more just reporting, doing the external reporting. I haven't seen any luckily I haven't seen any CFOs like that anymore. I think everybody has transferred into a business partner where they truly help the business in succeeding and in prioritizing the resources, putting the resources where we can get them to the best use. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen with sustainability too. We need to move away from bean counting and we need to become the business partners of the sustainability.
We are enabling the strategy.
Correct.
Yes.
And when we talk about ESG, we have heard your great examples from the environmental aspect. And when it comes to social, the S from the ESG, is it making even more complex?
Oh yeah, it becomes much more complex because of the value chain. Let me give you another example from human rights. We have to start assessing how we as a company affect human rights in our value chain. And that's it's already happening in Norway, but that's a big subject which we're trying to learn how to assess and what is the requirement of what is the level that we need to meet. So that's the human rights aspect, but also internally, how we start to look at diversity and inclusion and equity in different companies and how that is built. One example could even be on this, I would say this during this event, that we are talking about the roles of the CFO, and we have, if I remember correctly, 2 women speakers today. So we have to start to look at these different patterns and start to think about, are there some things that we need to change and how do we meet the requirements of not just the legislation, but also the shareholders and the stakeholders who know about these subjects.
And sometimes even the social and the financial can be very mixed, as in the example of what has happened to Amazon, where there are requirements for them to be more transparent on what are the taxes they are paying in different countries. So is this social or financial? I don't know, but it's important.
Yeah, yes, for sure. Is there any other ESG trends that you are recognizing and want to share with our audience?
Well, we talked about the CSO, so I think that's going to be a big trend in the future. But another big trend are sustainability controllers. And hopefully we have understood what we were talking about, that sustainability becomes more and more not just about administrative reporting, but about management accounting, trying to manage our companies the same way we manage our financials. And this aspect also affects the controllers. So we have sustainability controllers who need to collect the data and make sure that the data is valid for decision making. So that is one aspect that must, at least in my opinion, must grow in the future because of the different data and reporting requirements are increasing so significantly. But also the ESG-linked financial instruments like green bonds and loans, in my opinion, are going to become more of a trend in the future.
To wrap up this good conversation, could you give us a couple of key takeaways that audience should remember and understand from this topic?
Well, I think the first one is that CFO is going to become an integral part of ESG, and not just because of reporting, but also because of the administrative role.
Even much more important, the administrative role and helping the business with ESG matters.
Yes, and there needs to be this cultural aspect, what you talked about, that we need to change the culture and our thinking in a company to move forward, and not just thinking about the requirements of legislation, but also the requirements of the stakeholders, shareholders, and our internal needs. What do we need to do as a company?
And there, the good news is that finance has already done this transformation in history, so we already know how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So we would probably wrap this up to 3 points. So the ESG will become integral part of the CFO in the future before we have a CSO. The role change affects the culture, right? Yeah, it's going to change, affect the mindset, and also the CFO's role is not just administering the legislation, but also the internal resources to meet the requirements and make the change before we have the Chief Sustainability Officer.
Thank you so much for both of you for sharing this